All right, so news site 4, we can see our high-level objectives are to build the section page, a page that displays articles for a specific section. We want to create article search feature on the home page. So I've already npm installed this time. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to do npm run start. Make sure our news site is still working as is before we add on to it. All right, so we have our API up at localhost 3001. I go to localhost 3000. That's still getting going. All right, here we go. If I click on one of these, I should be able to go to that. Excellent. So it looks like this all still works as intended. So now we want our section pages to work. Because right now, these links don't go anywhere. And I don't really have a section page yet. And it says the route that should display a section page should be /section/section ID, where the section ID parameter would be one of the supported sections listed above: opinion, world, national, or business. So the idea is we want to click on the world link at the top navigation. That would redirect us to localhost 3000/section/world. Page would only display articles whose section property is set to world. And it says right here, to create this, we're going to need to create a section page.js. We're going to need to define our route. Within section page.js, we should utilize the fetch articles by section function, which we already created in news site 3. And it will pass this.state.articles into the article list component, thereby rendering the article list to the articles of the desired section. And it mentions here that the section page.js is going to be almost identical to homepage.js. We should even consider copying the code and pasting it in section page and adjusting it per the specifications above. I see no reason not to do that. So I'm going to make a new file, sectionpage.js. Go to our home page here. Just going to copy all of this, put it in here. Make sure we change both of these to section page. And instead of we'll have our component in mount here. But instead of using fetch articles, we want to fetch articles by section. So we go to my API right here, articlesapi.js. I've got a function called fetch articles by section, which takes a section as an argument and then returns the data. So I guess the big question here is I'm saying, okay, fetch articles by section. Where do I get the section to pass to this argument? We know our route is going to look like this, /section/section ID. So how do we get that section ID to pass to our function here?
This .props.match.params.section ID.
Yep. This .props.match.params.section ID. So if we're at world, it should pass that this.props.match.params.section ID should be world. If we're at localhost 3000/section/opinion, we should be able to pass opinion to this function. And once this function returns, we'll set the state so that articles will be the articles JSON. And we will render it this.state.articles to our article list, and we don't even really need to change this. Article list already knows what to do. Because article list doesn't care if it's getting a full list of every article or a partial list, it'll do the same thing no matter what. So we don't really need to change anything there. We only need to we only need to decide what props it gets. And now we can go to app.js and we can add a route. First, we need to import the section page. /pages/section page. And then we can just add another route, just like the article one. Excuse me. So exact path equals /sections /colon section ID. And our component is going to be section page. And I don't need this closing tag, I can just do that. Like so. All right, so we have a problem here. Fetch articles by section is not defined. Uh-oh. We imported fetch articles from the API because we copied from homepage. So we need to make sure we're importing the correct one, which would be fetch articles by section. All right, no errors there. So now if I go to localhost 3000 /sections/world. All right, looks pretty much the same as far as I can tell. What if I go to opinion? It's a much shorter list this time. And if I click on this one doesn't actually show us whether or not what section it is, so I'm going to assume it's correct. Actually, we do have a problem here. Because right now, since the URLs here are based on the ID number, or based on the index number in which they're rendered, it doesn't matter which ones we're displaying here, it'll always take us to 1, 2, 3 in that order. So we're going to have to fix that later. But for now, I'll get to that another time. Because we still have more to do in this part. So before we move on to the links, what questions do you have about the section page? Okay. So I'm going to quickly go to I believe it would be under article list. And if I take a look at my API, so earlier our JSON that we did in previous sections didn't have ID numbers. We've made it so that all of our articles here have their own ID number here. So instead of saying ID equals index plus 1, I should just be able to say ID equals article.id. So now I can see when I highlight these, instead of 1, 2, 3, I've got 4, 7, 8, 9, 10. So now these link to the correct articles instead of whichever article is first. So 1, 2, 3, 14, 20. All right. So now it says section links in our appnav.js. So right now, our links don't actually do anything. We want them to actually work. It says right so right now they accept a function called handle navclick. The function provided via that prop is called when one of the nav item link sections is clicked. Ultimately, we're going to use this functionality to redirect link to the section pages, but there is a better way. We can simply use the link component that React Router provides us. So we're already using links in our individual articles. We go to look at article teasers. These are already using these link tos. So we can do that something similar in our AppNav component. So first we need to find AppNav. There it is. So we're going to delete the handle nav prop that's being passed to the AppNav component from app.js. So we can just get rid of all of this whole thing. We need to make sure our AppNav component is nested under the router. At the moment, it is not. So I'm just going to move that right here. We need to remove references to the deprecated method in appnav.js. So we can get rid of this handle nav click right here and this on click as well. And then in appnav.js, we're going to modify the array of nav items that we're creating by mapping through the array that we're importing from config selections of X. These should now return links. So we take a look again at our article teasers. We can take a look at links. So we need to import link from React Router DOM. And then link takes a to equal to. In that case, went to /articles/id. Has a title there. So I'm going to replace that. We're getting something called nav items from our config sections.json, and we're mapping over it. So I'm creating a link here. We're going to import link from React Router DOM. When I look at my config section/json, you should be able to see we've got labels and values. I think we want, I don't know if it's really important which one is which, but let's do the values here. So we want the to equal. It'll be /sections. You're going to look at article teaser again, make sure, yep, /sections // All right, got to use backticks here. Whoop. I have forgotten how to type. One sec. There we go. /sections /nav item dot label or value. And the text is going to be nav item dot label. All right, so now if I refresh this, uh-oh. We have a problem here. It says a router may only have one child element. Okay, so that sounds like something's going on with this. So it was working earlier when everything was wrapped inside a div, but now we have this app nav on the same level as the div. So if I put this app nav inside this div, that means the router should only have one child component again. And now I can see here, opinion, world, national. If I click on it, so that's interesting. It's updating the URL, as you can see, but we're not, nothing's actually changing. And it says right here, typically, so we have a tip here. Typically, you put calls to fetch data in the component didMount method. You should do that here as well, but there's one other scenario to account for. If you go from one section page to another, e.g. going from opinion to world, the fetch call that you made in component didMount will not occur again. The section page at this point has been and is mounted. Instead, we'll need to hook into the component didUpdate method and add our fetch requests there. So essentially, if I go to my home page and then click on opinion, it updates because the section page component just mounted. But if I click on world, even though the URL changes, the section page is already mounted. Nothing's changing there. So something's updating, but it's not mounting again. So that's why we need to use our component did update. So if I take a look at the documents for component did update, we haven't really used this one much before. Component did update, it says it's evoked immediately after updating occurs. It's not called for the initial render. So it can take previous props, previous state, and a snapshot as arguments. And it says right here, you may call set state immediately in component did update, but note that it must be wrapped in a condition like in the above example, or you'll cause an infinite loop, which would only cause extra re-rendering. All right, so if I go back to section page, we have our async component did mount. We should be able to have an async component did update. And we have previous props. We don't have our own state here. Well, yeah, we do. So let's do previous state as well, just in case. And we need to have a conditional, it says. So in this case, how do we know if we've gone someplace else? Well, in this case, our section ID is the thing that changes, right? So I should be able to do something like this. If prev props dot match dot params dot section ID does not equal this dot props dot param match dot params dot section ID. So if that's the case, it seems like we just have to call this again. So I'm just going to copy this. Oops. Put that there. And let's see how it goes. So I'm going to go back to localhost 3000 basic first. All looks good. Hit opinion. Here we go. If I click on world, all right, looks different. National. Go back to world, national. Yep. So what's happening here, again, when the component updates, we guess we don't need this previous state after all, since we're not comparing state, we're just comparing props. We first check, okay, has the section ID changed? If it has, then we fetch articles again and set state again, and that triggers the re-render. So what questions do you have about component did update and the links?
Is there a way we can look at the previous props the same way we can look at prop?
I think the only way, if you're in component did update, you should be able to do that. So by console.log prev props here. But I don't know if you can do that via the inspector the same way that you would other things. So I click on opinion here, console. So here's my previous props. We have our match, location, history, all of that stuff. Don't know why console.logs twice, but there we go. But I don't know if there's a way to use this thing to check previous props and previous history. So if I go to section page here, we have props. Yeah, I don't see anything for the previous props. Great. Any other questions about using component did mount and the section page?
Yes, Noah, I have another question.
Mhm.
What's the reason why on line 21, why do I need to put this conditional statement in there? Because it feels like component did update is already kind of a conditional statement.
That's a good
when we are
question.
clicking on the section, the URL did update.
Mhm.
So isn't the component did update, this method should be automatically called? What's the reason why we should compare
Mhm.
the props again?
Yep.
If that makes
So
sense.
I'm going to check out the React component thing, the documents right here again. And so their example, they have if this.props.user ID does not equal that. And it says, it says, you may call set state immediately in component did update, but note that it must be wrapped in a condition like in the example above, or you'll cause an infinite loop. It would also cause an extra re-rendering, which, while not visible to the user, can also affect the component performance. So when you call set state, this function right here, that automatically triggers the component did update, because whenever you set state, that means the component is updating. So if you don't have this conditional here, then what'll happen is that it'll say, all right, component did update. We set the state. That means the component updated again. So component did update will trigger again, and therefore it'll set state again, and so on and so on and so forth. So this conditional here says, okay, we only want to change the state if the params have changed and our section, specifically the section ID.
Okay.
So without that, you get an infinite loop.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
No problem.
And is that why the console log renders twice? Because it's outside of the conditional?
Yeah, so it was outside of the conditional. So it did once when we changed it, console.logged once when we changed the URL, and once again when set state ran. But it didn't trigger the tradition. So if we put it in here, it would only console.log once. Okay. So moving on, next we have, so they have a note for functional component refactor. So you're going to be using useEffect when you do the functional component rather than component did update. So just keep that in mind. So next we're going to have the ability to search for articles on the home page. So it says in order to accomplish this, we need two high-level things. We need to add a new function in our articles API.js that accepts a search term and constructs a filter object using that search term. And we need to add an input box to the src pages/homepage component that calls the function above and updates state. So first, looking at articles API. So we're creating a new method called search articles that takes text. This function should almost be identical to fetch articles by section. The only difference is the filter object that's included in the request. So this one will have where title I like, and that'll be our text to search for here. So we find our API, article API.js. Here's fetch article by section. We'll call this one search, was it called search articles? It equals an asynchronous function that takes text as an argument. And our response is going to equal await fetch with our base URL. And we're going to say filter equals that where colon another pair of brackets title another pair of brackets I like, and that's where we put our text. So if we were to kind of try this out, so if we were go to localhost 3000/API/articles, question filter equals where, so this would be title colon I like. I didn't spell that right, did I? I like. And then I did nostrum, which I know is one of those things. So this should If I type that in right, yep, so we got this one, which has nostrum et atque and labore veniam nostrum sit necit, all of that stuff. So this is the URL we're constructing here, with this being our placeholder. All right, and then we just make it the same as fetch articles by section. So await response.json, and we return the data. And then we'll add that to our export. Now that we've done that, we need to update our homepage.js. So it's React strap, it says here, has a nicely styled input called input group. So we'll put this in our article, above our article list component in homepage.js. So above article list, we will say input group, which we need to import, I just realized. So it'll be import input group and input from React strap. And then we'll have an input here. Before we add that function, I just want to make sure that it actually shows up. So we'll say type equals text, placeholder equals search. So if I go to my home page, here's a search bar. I can type stuff into it, just it doesn't do anything yet. So most of our events that we've been using have been on clicks, but there are dozens, if not hundreds, of events we can use. One of my favorites is on change. So on change is kind of the same thing as on click, except instead of it functions whenever this component, the text inside of it changes at all. So if I do on change equals, and then we'll have that, and it'll take event, and we'll say there's no function there. There's no event.prevent default to do, but we are going to be using a function called handle search. This.handle search, which is going to take the event as an argument. And now we need to actually write that function. So handle search takes in an event as an argument. And it gives us some call here. So we have our text to search for equals event.target.value. So const text to search for equals event.target.value. And we need to say, all right, when we type this in, we want to change the articles to things that match our search function. So that will necessitate updating our state, right? So that means we're going to need some kind of lifecycle method if we're updating state. Because if I do something like, so I could do something like, all right, this would be articles JSON again, equal await. And this would be search articles. We need to import that, I just realized. Search articles with our text to search for. Then we could say this.setState. Articles are now our articles are now articles JSON. All right, says parsing error, await is only allowed within async functions. Oh, so this should be an async function as well. So if I do it like this real quick, it breaks. And it says right here, articles.map is not a function within our list group, or our list group within article list. If I take a look at article list, so articles.map is not a function because, and I'm assuming that means that articles, something changed about articles here that was not working earlier. So take a look at homepage. So articles is always equal to this.state.articles. We updated this.state.articles to articles.json. Let's see here. Something went wrong there, something very wrong. I'm going to open my inspector. We have a bunch of errors here. Oh. Can't perform a React state update on an unmounted component. This is a no-op, but it indicates a memory leak in your application. So first thing I want to do is figure out, okay, what did our article list actually get? So if I console.log articles, refresh this page. So here's our list of articles. And if I type in A, let's see if it did anything before it broke. So we got an error. Status code 400 cannot parse JSON encoded object value. All right, so something went very wrong here. So maybe it's how our search articles worked, perhaps. We said data equals response.json. That looks like it's supposed to. Take a look at homepage again. All right, so if I console.log articles.json this time without updating state, let's see what happens. So now if I type this in, we get an error. Status code 400 cannot parse JSON encoded object value. All right, so we're getting an error 400 when we try to use our articles API here. So something's wrong with our search articles function is what I'm assuming. So we have our base URL, question mark filter equals, where title, I like text. That looks okay to me. But what we're getting is an error. That it can't parse something. All right, so we set localhost 3001 /API /articles filter like that. If I copy this URL, let's see if it should be okay, but if I go here, all right, so what did I do wrong? Oh, I think I know. Maybe I needed these quotation marks there. All right, try this one more time. Okay, it's not breaking, that's a good sign. All right, and we can see that console.log from homepage.js. So this part is getting updated. So now that that's fixed, I'm going to try setting state again. This.set state. Articles is now articles.json. So if I do that, looks like it works. If I look for Delore, So I actually didn't need to use a component did update here because that's already kind of happening with article list. So article list is just saying the props, this.props is always being updated, which always triggers a re-render. So as soon as our state is altered here, the props of article list automatically changes and it automatically re-renders. So that gives me very dynamic search ability. So one of our problems here, of course, is if I delete all of these, our home page is now broken because it's now set to all of it unless I refresh the page. But I'm not going to worry about that too much. So now we have a working search function. Does anyone have any questions about the search function?
Yes, Noah, could you go to that onChange attribute you add in? I want to see how the function was passed in. Yeah. Okay, so what is the event argument here indicating?
So the event is the triggering event, which is in this case the change event. So whenever we type something in here or delete something, that's a change event. And from the change event, we can get things like event.target.value, which gives us, in this case, what's in this text box. So similar to when we were doing vanilla JavaScript a couple weeks ago, from the event, you can get to what triggered the event and etc. So this is actually vanilla JavaScript right here.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions about the search function?
I have one. What's so after I see how the state's getting changed and everything, what's re-rendering the new state again?
So yeah, state changes here, and essentially the article list component, its props is identical to whatever state of this is. And whenever props changes for a component, it automatically triggers a re-render.
Okay, got it.
So this article list is just saying, okay, my props are changing, I'm just re-render everything. And in this case, we don't need to use component did update or anything like that because it's just doing its work automatically, displaying whatever props it has. All right. So if we take a look here now, our next steps. So again, once you've gotten it with class-based versions, do functional versions. It says right here, there is quite a bit of repeated code and our code base is not organized very well at all. So if you want to, you can refactor the code base to be something you can be proud of, and you can also choose to do that in either the master branch or the functional version branch, or both if you've got the time. All right, so that is your assignment for today. Recreate news site 4 the way I did here, and then do it again with functional components, and then refactor it, so there's less repeated code.